Yes, yes. Hey everybody, we'll get started in about 5 minutes. We will start at 6:05 sharp. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey everybody, how are y'all doing? Thank you so much for joining us again. We're really excited for this session today. It's going to be a little different. It's going to be more of like an interactive session, and this is going to be a really good opportunity because Brianna's actually a professor as well as a part of the admissions committee at her university. So if you had any, general admission questions or questions for her, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on them and we'll relay them back to her as they go. We want you guys to be as active in chat as possible. Let's see, the quiz is going to be at the end. We'll give you more information about that towards the end of it, but the link will be set out and probably the same thing as usual. But aside from that, guys, I think we're ready to go. Brianna, if you're ready on that end, you can go ahead and take over.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yes,
welcome everybody in internet land. Thanks for coming. I am going to introduce myself and have like a couple of pictures, so it's not like so boring. Sorry, this is just like the teacher in me where I'm like, must have visual aids. So share a little bit about me. My name is Brianna Cardenas. I am a physician assistant. I'm also a certified athletic trainer. My clinical specialty is in pain management. But I also am a small business owner. I do patient advocacy for people with rare diseases, primarily Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. And I also do a lot of community education, and obviously like I work as a professor, so education is like in my blood. I became a PA primarily because I am a person with chronic illness, and I've always been interested in healthcare to some extent. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do all the way up into my junior year of college. So if you're already an undergrad and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I'm running out of time. Like, don't worry, you have plenty of time. Plenty of people choose PA as like a second career. So you're not like late to the game. If you're like, I'm already 20 and I don't know what I want to do, like relax, like you have plenty of time to like figure out what you want to do with your life. This just happens to be the path that I took. And I happen to think PAs are awesome, and being a PA is a great career path. I do pain management because living as a person with chronic pain for the longest, I was offered like just opioids, here you go. And that is like not something that like vibes with me for like a lifetime treatment. And I don't think that that's like a helpful treatment modality long term for people. So pain management is really interesting to me because it gives me an opportunity to build rapport with a patient population that's often like kind of neglected and underserved. And it's really given me an opportunity to learn more about like holistic medicine and alternative therapies that have been really quite interesting and have helped me in my own healing journey. And then this is a group of pain management professionals and patients who work with spinal fluid leaks. And believe it or not, this is like all the people in the country that work on spinal fluid leaks. There's not really a whole lot of us out there that deal with, specializing in such a unique scenario. So it's really a nice, like tight knit little family of pain management providers that kind of sub-specialize in other rare diseases. After I had back surgery from my own spinal fluid leak, I started doing patient advocacy and speaking at events, which led kind of into like developing my social media presence. And that was kind of a cool thing to do. I started seeing patients as clients instead. I started a small business and started doing patient advocacy. And then after that, I found education. And so now I do patient advocacy part-time. I'm going to be starting my own practice in January. And then I teach full-time at the University of Laverne. Laverne is in the Inland Empire, which is just east of LA, or the LA County. Sorry, hang on. I have to like scold my dogs really quick. Hey, calm down. Sorry, they were like being noisy and decided to wrestle right by my leg. Grew up in Laverne. I actually went to the University of Laverne for undergrad, and then I stayed local to go to PA school at Western U. And now I teach at the University of Laverne, and we have a PA program that is about to graduate our inaugural cohort. And we just completed interviews for our 4th cohort coming in. So super excited. And if you want to stay in touch with me, or if you want a link to like this presentation, feel free to snap a quick screenshot. This will take you to my contact info that has my email, or that has other contact information for me. Also, if you're interested in attending the University of Laverne, you want to sign up for an info session, the link in the info is also at this QR code. So primarily, the goal or the purpose of what we wanted to talk about today was tips on getting into PA school. So I wanted to go primarily into pre-PA tips. And then I really want to turn it over to you all. Like, my goal is to make sure that I'm helping you all as pre-PA students and answering any questions that you might have about the process, about interviewing, about, just the process in general, or about the profession in general, because I am here to help and hopefully like Sherpa you through the experience, or at least give you some tips. I'm also a firm believer in social justice, and I don't think that you should have to pay for this type of information. So find a mentor. There are groups on Facebook. I know Facebook is like probably for old people like me, but there are groups on Facebook that have free PA mentoring and matching. To me, this is information that like PAs should be sharing with you all and paying it forward. Like, that's part of how we grow the profession and grow diversity in the profession. And I know I sure as heck would not have had like $900 to, go through some of the like pre-PA coaching and that kind of stuff that's offered out there. So please know that these resources are available for free. A lot of times you just kind of have to dig for them, but please don't let like cost and that kind of stuff stand in the way of you going for your dreams. So a couple things that you can do to kind of stand out in your applications. Number one that you can start doing right now, even before you start applying, is get on LinkedIn and build yourself a network. So LinkedIn is like the business Instagram, right? I'm sure you've seen like the meme where it's like you have your LinkedIn pic and your Facebook pic and your Instagram pic and your Tinder pic. Those are all very different. LinkedIn is definitely a networking platform for professionals, but as a pre-PA student, you cannot have enough contacts. You might be able to even snag some like shadowing opportunities in real life. and virtually through your connections on LinkedIn. And the etiquette of adding people on LinkedIn, you don't have to know them to connect with them. So like I have thousands of contacts on LinkedIn, and I know probably 500 of them in real life. So don't be shy to just like add a whole bunch of people. You can follow hashtags that are relevant to the profession, and LinkedIn will also keep you up to date with whatever hashtags you follow. So if you follow like the AAPA or you follow hashtag physician assistant, that will tell you some really must know things about changes in our profession, changes to, some challenges to our scope of practice and so forth. So really stay connected and stay on LinkedIn and start building that network now. That costs zero money, and you can absolutely do that. Another thing that you can do is consider getting some medical experience. So I know that volunteering can be really hard, especially if you're like the primary earner in your household, or you're having to like work and put yourself through school. It can be really hard to basically volunteer your time because you're giving up money, right? If you're not going to work. So if at all possible, consider getting some income or a job in a related healthcare field, whether that is working as a medical assistant or an EMT or a scribe. All of those things will be super duper helpful, and you must start building a professional network, because at the end of the day, somebody's got to write you a letter of rec to get into PA school. Actually, like 3 somebodies are going to have to write you a letter of rec. And you want to make sure that they're healthcare providers that you have a longstanding relationship with, if possible. So it's important to try and break into the field somehow at some level of healthcare. Ways that you can start staying up to date with what's going on in your state. I'm in California, so CAPA is our state chapter of our physician assistant advocacy group. Joining your state chapter can be really helpful because they offer scholarship information. There's lots of pre-PA tips. There's lots of resources with your memberships. And it will keep you up to date. And when you do get into PA school and you're looking for jobs, there's lots of great jobs that are posted on your state chapter's website. So definitely I would consider that as well. One thing that I hear on a regular basis, moving into, starting to prepare for like writing your personal statement and all of that as you're already like moving towards applying for CASPA. One thing that I hear a lot is that people are like, oh, okay, like what's the perfect way to write a personal statement? Or like, what are the elements that I must include? And that answer is a little bit different for everybody. I would say, make sure that you're being authentic in your personal statement. I can't tell you how many personal statements follow like a cookie cutter, like, start with catchy intro, tell about some impactful experience in the medical field, and then tell about why PAs are great. Like, dude, I already know PAs are great, right? And if I'm sitting on a admissions committee, which I do, and so do all the other people that are going to be reading your personal statement at some point, right? They are reading the same thing over and over and over. Like, I, as an admissions person, already know that PAs are great. I don't need you to write me a letter saying like how great this one PA was that, you can write a sentence about that. But if that's like your whole personal statement, like I still don't know anything about you at the end of the day, right? So please make sure to be authentic, let your real why shine through. And if you're kind of at the phase where you're like, hey, I feel like I have my prerequisites to apply for PA school, but I don't really have like a good strong why of why I want to be a PA versus like a nurse practitioner or versus some other like healthcare provider, then maybe take a year to figure it out, right? Like as long as your prereqs aren't going to expire, there's no rule that says that you have to rush into PA school and be like the first into PA school, right? Like you can take as much time as you need to figure out like, is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? Is this, do I have the professional maturity to go into a program for the sake of wanting to do this for my career, not just because it's like the next step in the process, right? So figure out what you stand for, figure out what makes you authentic, and figure out what drives you in healthcare. Because just saying like, oh, I can't wait to take like cool pics and put them on Instagram, like that's not a good reason to be a PA. Being a PA is a lot of work, just like any other profession in healthcare. And being a PA is a lot of emotional work that you're going to do on a regular basis anyways, or do on a regular basis, or should be, in my opinion, a lot of emotional work if you care about your patients. So if you're not really solid on like, hey, I want to go serve this special population, or I really want to work with this type of patient, or I really just want to help others because of this reason, you should figure that out before you start applying for PA school, even if you have all your prereqs. The best people that come to PA school are the ones who have a good why that they want to do this, right? Like, hey, I did mission work at, like some border detention center, and it like shook me. And now I realize that there's health inequities in the system, and like I want to go serve underserved populations. Awesome. Like, I'm glad that you have that life experience. You should put that in your personal statement, right? So like figure out what you stand for, figure out what drives you, figure out what is going to give you that passion when you are burned out and you're like, oh gosh, like I still have 8 more hours of my shift to go, and you're tired and you're exhausted. It can't just be like, oh my gosh, for the gram. Like, you have to have some burning desire to help others, and you should be solid on that, because you're going to need it to carry you through the periods that make work hard. Part of that too, and part of what will help you through that, is finding support. That's what this little picture down here on the bottom is. So get a good group of support. That's a question that some admissions committees ask. They ask, like, how are you going to cope with PA school, right? Like, how are you going to be able to like manage the demands of a program like this? That was a question that I got as a student when I was applying. So you should really put together a good support network, because you're going to need it as you get into PA school. So whether that's your peers, whether that's an online community, like whatever it is, I know that you are very smart if you're getting ready to apply to PA school, but I promise you, doing this on your own is very difficult, and you're going to do a lot better if you can get with a group or at least a couple of people to support you in some capacity. So I would absolutely recommend finding a support network. And then this little picture right here, let's see if it is going to play for me. So this is our ULVPA Instagram profile. So I would recommend, if you are interested in applying to the University of Laverne, or really any PA program, that you ought to go on their Instagram and reach out to their students. Most of those profiles are run by students, and they're very willing to share about what their experiences are at whatever particular program. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to those students, because a lot of times they're really willing to share and give you insight into the program, what makes that program special, what they like about the program, maybe what they don't like about the program. And that stuff's important to know, because PA school is really hard. It's 2 to 3 years of your life, and you're going to be paying a lot of money to go there, right? So you want to make sure that it's a good fit for you, just as much as it is to try and just get into a program. You want to make sure that you guys are a good fit for each other, you and the program, because you're going to be with each other for a long period of time. So that is it for like the presentation part. I had a couple of questions that came through on my Instagram, like DMs and questions. So someone asked about being a PA, or like transitioning to PA later on in life, like as a second career, and basically like starting from scratch, and any like insight or tips into that. So a couple of things with that in mind. I guess it depends on where you're starting from scratch, right? So I don't know if from scratch means like you don't have a bachelor's degree, or you like, have zero like advanced education, like you have like your GED, like, because to me that's like from scratch, right? Like you have your high school diploma and you're like, I'm ready, right? So if you're moving into a second career, and you need to start from scratch, like with a bachelor's and everything, I would highly recommend utilizing a junior college to get some prerequisites if you can. And right now, while everything is online, it's a good opportunity to knock out a bunch of the prereqs that don't require a lab. If you're starting from scratch, you're probably at least 3 or 4 cycles away from applying, especially if you don't have a bachelor's. So like best case scenario, you'd be going back to like undergrad, basically getting a bachelor's, which in the very fastest you would do that in 3 years. And then you still have to get prerequisites. So you're probably like 4 PA CASPA application cycles away. In that time, I would make sure that you're building a network of healthcare providers and establishing some kind of ongoing professional relationship with a healthcare provider in some capacity. The best letters of rec are usually by people who have long-standing relationships, and you're not going to get like a good long-standing relationship out of somebody you shadowed 3 times, right? Like it's out of somebody that you've worked with for like 3 or 4 years. So if you have that foresight of saying like, okay, well, I'm not applying to CASPA for like 3 or 4 or 5 more years, start building your network in that time while you're going to school. If I could have done things all over again and done things differently, I would have gone to a JC for a bunch of my prerequisites, or junior college, because for those of you that already have your bachelor's and like went straight to a 4-year or whatever, Like that's a lot of money, right? Like just straight up, I would have saved like tens of thousands of dollars if I would have done maybe half of my schooling at a JC and then the other half at like a 4-year and finished out that way. I get that sometimes it's not always an option, like geographically, but that's just my 2 cents. That would have saved a heck of a lot of money because PA school is not cheap either. And at the end of the day, you're going to be walking out with a lot of student loans. So the more that you can kind of curtail that at the beginning, the better. Say you already have a bachelor's degree and you're starting a second career. Maybe you were like, I don't know, like a respiratory therapist or like an x-ray tech or something like that. And you're like, hey, I want to go back and be a PA. If you have to take all your prereqs from scratch, maybe you went to school like 10 years ago, like me, you would basically have to look at which prerequisites expire. It's usually your sciences, and taking those over again at a JC is a good bet. So at a junior college, you're going to be able to do it for a lot cheaper. You can do some of them online right now during the time of COVID. A lot of schools are allowing for like online labs because of the pandemic. But in non-pandemic times, usually they're going to want those classes to have a lab. So just know that you have to kind of look, and it varies by program, basically, and see which prerequisites are potentially expired and that you would need to retake. And I would still stand by that professional networking. So still do that in advance. I guess that's my 2 cents on starting from scratch or second career. Let me check my DMs really quick on this other one. Did you all have any other questions, guys, that came through on your DMs?
Yeah, we have quite a few, and we've gotten a lot in the chat as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we
Hit
have
me.
like 140 people in here.
Dang.
So, yeah.
Hey, what's up, 140 people?
Yeah. We'll start with the Instagram one, though, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, perfect. So somebody with the handle Notorious PAC is asking.
Nice.
Yeah, he's asking about your favorite hobbies.
My favorite hobbies, for sure, spending time with my husband and my dogs. I am somebody who, like, I like going out in nature and going out to like a restaurant when it's not a pandemic. That is like the thing that I absolutely just will not do right now, because like all of us as healthcare providers are like working extra hard to like try and manage this pandemic. So I 1000% like bet you money you will not see me at a restaurant right now. But like in real life, I enjoy going out and like getting something healthy to eat. I also play video games. Like that's my like unplug my brain space. And I have a Super Nintendo emulator on my computer, and you best believe I get down on some Super Mario a couple times a week, or some Donkey Kong Country, like the OG Donkey Kong Country with Diddy and Donkey Kong. So those are my little pastimes that help me kind of like keep my self-care in check, like doing stuff that turns my brain off.
That's awesome. You just went up like 10 plus 10 points for me. That's so cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I got into World of Warcraft for a little bit, and like that was too much because I was like dreaming in like Warcraft and Quest, and I was like, I'm in too deep. So now I just can do like little episodic like like things I can press pause.
Sure. So let's see. Camila's asking. Oh, sorry, that's probably not the best one. Let's see. Oh, so they're asking, what is the hardest section notice PA students struggling in?
Like in school?
Yeah, so like once they've made it into PA school.
Pharm. Just straight up, like pharmacology is hard. But getting a subscription to like Osmosis Med or something like that, or if you know you're going to be heading to PA school and you're one of those, like, so there's two schools of thought on this, right? Like, so some people are like, I'm into PA school. How do I like prep for PA school? Like, where would my time be best spent? Learning med term, if you're not like super duper 1000% solid on med term, will help you a lot. Because that's kind of a general thing where people have like the small hurdle of being like, what does that word mean when they see it on a PowerPoint for the first time? And it's like, because they just didn't know the med term. So learn med term. And if you're already solid on that, you're like, yeah, Brianna, like I know that already. Pick up a pharm book. Like go and get, a used version on Amazon, like 2 editions old or something like that. And learn like basic pharmacotherapy mechanisms, or just start learning some of the tables of medicines. Because I promise you that will put you like leaps and bounds ahead of everybody, like once you get into PA school, because pharm is hands down the topic that like even my fellow professors were like, oh God, like glad I don't have to like sit through a pharm lecture ever again. So like pharm is hard. I would say that would probably be the sentiment of most of my students too. And our professor is amazing. She's a pharmacist herself. It's just pharm is hard. So just keeping it real.
That's kind of an interesting thing because we mostly deal with pre-PA students, so we haven't really had many questions about that. So thanks for that insight. I feel like you're a perfect person to ask.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I had a question. I have like some really straightforward ones. So someone asked the difference between a PAC and a PAS. So a PA-C stands for certified. Sorry, I live by the train tracks, but C is for certified. S is for student. You might see on people's like Instagram descriptions like PAS1 or PAS2. PAS1 is their first year as a student. PAS2 is their second year as a student. And if it's a program that goes beyond 24 months, then you'll see PAS3 as like the third year student. And let's see. This is another one that's like pretty straightforward. How to pick programs to apply for. If you're starting from scratch and you're just like not sure at all, I would recommend My PA Box. My PA Box is amazing. It's basically like cars.com for PA programs where you're like, I want a car that like costs this much and has this many miles on it and it's blue and it's a 2-door. Like you can basically put all that in and it'll be like, here's 100 cars that match your search criteria. So with My PA Box, you can be like, I want a school that like is in my state, doesn't require the GRE, doesn't require the PA CAT or whatever the heck that is, doesn't require some kind of standardized test, and has a commitment to diversity. Like, there you go. And it'll be like, here's all the programs in your state that fit. If you want to use my discount code, it's GoHeal, because my other handle is Healed and Empowered. So GoHeal with a capital G will give you a little discount on your My PA Box subscription. It's $55 and it's 1000% worth it, because like the amount of time that you will be spending trying to like skim every PA program in the country and be like, do I meet the prerequisites for this, is going to take you way more time than like $55 would cost. Even if you are somebody who was like me, like making $8 an hour, like making sandwiches at one point, like that $55 would have gone a long way, right? So 1000% recommend My PA Box. I'll take some questions from your end, guys.
Yeah.
So the last one we have on Instagram, Amber would like to know, is it possible to get into PA school with a 2.8 GPA?
Let's see. I would say it's not impossible, but I think that given how competitive PA school is, you're probably going to be better off retaking whatever prerequisites you struggled with. Because if you think about, you know, what that GPA means, I guess I'm wondering two things, like, because my brain always like makes these little like algorithmic flow charts. So it's like, is it a 2.8 cumulatively or a 2.8 sciences, number one? So if it's 2.8 cumulatively, and let's say you got like 4.0s in all your sciences and you like degaffed about everything else, right? You're like, oh, I just like showed up once to art and was like, hey, suck it, teach, and like walked out, right? And you got an F in art. Like, okay, whatever. Like if the school doesn't require art as a prerequisite, like maybe that might not hurt you terribly, but you for sure need strong science GPAs in most programs. And if you think that a 3.0, when you think about it, like that means you got a B, right? The rigor level of PA sciences is so much higher than undergraduate. Like I was one of those people in undergrad that like didn't have to study a whole lot. And I thought getting through PA school, I was going to coast because I was smart. Like it is so much work. And it, like the analogy that our professor gave us on day one when I was a student was, being in PA school is like trying to take a sip from a fire hydrant, and it's real accurate. Like it is so much information and you have to be like on top of it from day one. So if you're not like solid on anatomy, physiology, and like microbiome, you're not ready. You should go back and retake it.
Awesome.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks for leveling with us, not sugarcoating anything.
Yeah, I will keep it 1000, because like if I like BS you, like that doesn't help anybody, right? Then I just sound like I'm like the PA program salesperson, and like that's not what it's about, right? Like I think one thing that's important to remember is that like when you're applying for a PA program, you're not just applying to be like, look how great I am, PA school, like your third grade picture, right? Where you like have your elbow on like a stack of books and you like look in the distance, right? You're like, here's how great I am. Because that comes off super self-centered, right? Like when you're applying to a PA program, like the the people that are interviewing you are PAs, and they're like, is this person going to be a good healthcare provider? Like, they're going to be one of our colleagues. And
Yeah.
so like, if you know nothing about the profession, if you're just like, yeah, like I heard that this is like kind of like MP school, but shorter, like, no, like you're missing the buck. You know what I mean? Like, you're not in the right headspace yet, because there is that level of like emotional maturity and like just kind of like wherewithal that I think someone should have.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to admit that I was like that person that was like super smart in undergrad and like very type A, which I now know was uncontrolled anxiety. And I was like, I'm just going to go straight through to PA school and I'm going to do great. And I totally like was not emotionally mature, or like didn't have that level of like self-awareness. So when I got stressed, I would binge drink, or when I got stressed, I would just like have a breakdown and be like, maybe I should quit PA school, and then like somehow stumble through it. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
if I would have had the level of insight that I had even like 2 years later, just from maturing a little bit, right? Like going in at age 25 instead of age 23, like I would have had a much better time in PA school. My husband would have had a much better time like going through PA school and not have to like literally like drag me out and be like, you can do it, babe, like every day, you know?
Sure.
So if you need a little extra time to just like grow as a human first, like I strongly 1000% encourage that. Like I would have done well to do that myself. So
Yeah,
like no
definitely.
shame in taking a gap year.
We appreciate the sincerity and, you know, you giving your personal experience like that. I even as pre-PA students, we can appreciate the panel of PAs looking at who would be the best like peers in a PA setting, you know, because even though we're not there yet, we want to one day make sure that the people that we're working with, our teammates, are, you know, up to the same caliber, like people that we respect, not just some, you know, fresh face, whatever, doesn't really care about it, just doing it for the money or the work-life
Right.
balance they keep hearing about, or whatever these, you know, fallacies are.
Right. That is an
Yeah.
excellent description.
Yeah.
That is a much more PG word than I would have chosen, sir. So well done. Like, let's not get your channel censored on YouTube. I'm glad that you
Right.
said that.
Yeah. But we'll start going into the questions from our chat now. We have a million of them.
Woo.
Heather is asking, how do you open your own practice as a PA? So just about the facets of owning your own business as a PA.
It's super exciting. So I live in California,
Yeah.
and in the state of California, we have something called optimal team practice, or OTP, which means that you don't have to work under the scope of practice of your physician. You can work under the scope of practice in which you've been trained. So, for example, like, what does that mean? That means that, like, if you wanted to be a cardiology PA, for example, before you would have had to work under a cardiology doctor. So in order to be trained, you still need to be trained by a cardiologist. But let's say you've been practicing for 5, 6, 7 years and you're like, I know cardiology pretty well. And I want to go live in a rural part of California where there's like a huge shortage of cardiologists, right? And the closest cardiologist is like 100 miles away. But I need to work with a supervising physician, right? You can hire a supervising physician and contract them out basically under whatever specialty they are. And you work under the scope of practice that you've been trained. So for me, I'm a pain management provider. I specialize in holistic modalities. So I incorporate like mind, body, spirit, and alternative medicines. I actually have a research interest in like psychedelic therapies for chronic pain and end of life illnesses and palliative illnesses. And that is not something that is typical. And so for me, working with a patient population that primarily is like a palliative care, there's not a lot of people like in the country that specialize in this. So to open your own practice, you have to first incorporate yourself as a PA corporation, not a medical corporation, because if you incorporate as a medical corporation as a PA, you're only allowed to own 49% of that practice. And for me, I wanted to own my own practice. So I have a PA corporation that right now it's an LLC, but in the new year, I'm switching to a PA corporation. And then you can practice medicine under that. You then need to get your liability insurance for your practice and for you as an individual. And then you determine if you want to work virtually or in person. I'm going to do only 100% virtual, like telehealth, and 1/2 day a week in clinic with my supervising physician, who is a family practice doctor. And I will be practicing pain management because I have been extensively trained in pain management. So you can do that in California. You have to go through like the state and file a business license and incorporate. I would highly recommend getting a lawyer to do this because I am not a business background person at all, like at all. So I literally was like, I'm just going to hire a lawyer to to do this. And it was a big decision because that was a big expense for me. But it's been worth it so far. So the LLC thing was the right move for me to say, like, can I manage a business? Can I like do this myself? Can I start a website? Can I book clients and deal with clients and manage all of that? And the answer was yes. And so now I'm ready to like take it into a practice setting. So super excited.
That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Thanks. I'm stoked on it.
Emily would like to know, this one's a good question. She says, can you speak a little bit about the importance of advocacy in the PA profession / how can you get involved now?
Advocacy like for the PA profession or just like general like advocacy for some type of group?
For the profession.
So really good on that. If you follow Rectal Rockstar, his Instagram handle is Rectal Rockstar. His name's Jonathan Baker. He actually just posted something on his Instagram stories today from, I want to say it's the NYSSPA, which is the New York State Society of PAs. And they're actually hosting a PA Advocacy 101 session tomorrow night. So that might be a good thing to watch. But the best thing that you can do to advocate for the profession is to join your state and national chapter. So in California, it's CAPA, and the national chapter is, or the national group is AAPA. Just simply the act of paying your dues, like your membership dues, does so much for the profession, because there are people who sit on AAPA's like board of directors and at CAPA's state level, like CME committee and board of directors, and they advocate to say like, hey, in California, I would like to, practice in a, somewhat autonomous style where I don't need to work under an SP or supervising physician of the same specialty. I want to be able to work in the scope of practice that I've been trained, and that's OTP, right? And that was made possible by dues that were paid to CAPA, and those dues paid people to sit on CAPA's board and then go advocate on the Hill for us, right? Because I wouldn't know the first thing about how to like go get a law passed, right? Like I don't know policy as well as, some of our peers do who have like masters in public health or like other policy degrees. So literally the best thing that you can do now is pay your dues to be a like member of your state and national organization. Beyond that, some of the stuff that I see on Instagram is like amazing, or like what you guys are doing right now, right, is amazing. Hosting like virtual shadowing events and like putting together resource hubs for people that are trying to get into PA school. So even if it's just sharing about like what is a PA on Instagram, like that's helpful. Like everything counts.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Just to reiterate, none of this would be possible without awesome PAs like you being able to, give their time and effort to do this kind of thing. So thank you so much. Yes, definitely, definitely.
That was like kind of creepy. It like came out of like the corner. It's like just
it's like upside down from the top of the screen.
Right, exactly. That would be extra creepy. Like note to self. All right.
So Mia is asking, can the interview process really make or break your acceptance into a PA program?
Yes, absolutely. And side note, like this is just kind of my like murky area of like paying to have someone interview prep you. I think that it's helpful, and I think that if you sound too rehearsed, that doesn't come off as sincere. So I would just keep that in mind, right? Like that if you are, wanting to utilize one of those like paid mentorship or interview prep services, just know that you need to have done like the work. Like you should have built your sandcastle. They're just there to like refine it and make it pretty for you. But they shouldn't be doing all the work for you. And so that's my concern about like relying too heavily on that kind of stuff, because basically you're going to come off really rehearsed and not very warm. And I mean, every PA program is different. So at our program, we are very, very into like the compassionate medicine and humanistic care and like desire to help underserved populations. So if someone walked into our interview and like had a 4.0 GPA and was like, yeah, like medicine's a business and I'm just here to like get money and like go take pics for the gram. Like, I mean, me personally, I wouldn't score that person very high because they wouldn't be a good fit at our program. They might be a good fit at some other program, but not ours, So I would do your homework on what the mission and vision of your program that you're applying for or interviewing for is, because I know that like you might be applying to like 5-10 different programs, and you should do your homework on each individual program that you're going to interview at, because if one is like, we want to focus on rural health, and you like degaff about rural health, like you really are not going to be a good fit. And like the good person thing to do is like, if you're not into rural health, you should give up your interview seat so that someone else can interview. Because like if you don't care about rural health, you shouldn't be applying to a program for rural health just because you meet the prerequisites, right? Like you guys aren't going to be a good fit. Like if that's not what you care about, like don't waste everyone's time and go to a program that's going to like, really emphasize that, right? Like you should go to a program and apply for programs that are a good fit for you. So if diversity is really important to you, apply to programs that have that in their mission statement. If innovation is really important to you, you should apply for programs with that in their mission statement. Like you should research each program and speak to what the values of that institution are. And when I say speak to those values, I mean like authentically, not like, oh yeah, I saw that the mission statement was diversity and inclusivity. Like, it should like come through, and like, how do you do that, right? Like, what does that look like to you in real life?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
That seems like an overlooked topic. It seems like most people apply just because, this is closest to home, or,
Yeah.
Right. And no shame in that game, right? Like, but you got to have like a compelling reason. So like when I applied to PA school, there weren't like a ton of schools around. I mean, I applied in 2010 and started PA school in 2011, but I only applied to one school, partially for the reason that for me, it was a cost issue and an accessibility issue as a disabled person. So for me, like, I wasn't going to be an effective learner if I had to commute an hour, right? Like my back would hurt if I needed to do that. And also like that was going to be common and like a common theme for me living and working. Like I knew at that age, like that I'm going to live in Laverne the rest of my life, like with my husband, and this is where we're going to stay. And so for me, the health of our society around the Laverne area is super important to me because this is where my parents live. This is where my mother-in-law lives. This is where like the people I care about live. Like, so that matters to me. And I was able to speak to it like that, not just because like, oh, like the commute time is like,
definitely.
primo. So.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like, just like a small thing to overlook, but like the way that you did that, you really made something seem like, or you made something that seemed superficial a lot more deep. You gave a lot more purpose to it, talking about your family and, your own disability and that kind of thing, about how like that affects your decision. And I feel like PA, like the interviewers will see that and they'll appreciate you being so transparent with that kind of thing.
100%. And I think that like right now is like a beautiful pivotal time to talk about like accessibility issues and diversity issues. Sorry, like somebody must have walked by our backyard because our dogs are like doing their job, but they're like really the sweetest girls. Like they're German Shepherd and a pit bull, and people are like, oh my God, but they're just like really just big goofballs. So, but anyways, they just have mean barks.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second. I'm actually gonna like bring them inside because my ADD does not allow me to like focus with that in the background.
No problem at all. All right, guys. Well, we have this little break. Thank you so much for all the really good questions. We're going to try and get as many in as we can. We have been writing them all down. Yeah, so many good questions. Thank you. This is a really good session for you guys because, her being a part of the admissions committee, I feel like this is some information that you wouldn't be able to get really anywhere else. So keep it up, guys. We'll be right here.
Okay, I'm back, but I'm gonna keep my camera off because it's time to rest my back. So, but I'm still here for it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Perfectly.
All right, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So on to the next question. Susan is asking, do you have to have a master's degree in addition to your PA degree in order to teach at college level?
Yes. At most institutions, at least to be a principal faculty member, not necessarily to do like adjunct work, but if you want to be like a full-time faculty member, you do. And the reason I know this, aside from like working in academia, I have a colleague who is like one of the, I used to call her Mama Linda. Like she is one of the most amazing PAs I've ever worked with. She was like my PA mom, or one of them, like when I very first like was a baby PA. And she is amazing. She taught me like many of the things that I know. And she would be an amazing teacher, but she became certified before they mandated masters. And so as a result, like does not have her masters and isn't eligible to teach. And I was like, oh, that is like a disservice to our profession because she would have been freaking amazing at teaching. I still stand by the fact that she would be, but she would have to go back and like unfortunately get a master's in order to do that.
See, that's I didn't even know that. So that was a good question.
Yeah,
And this
kind of
one's
a fun
unique.
one.
We've never had a question like this before, but it's a good one. Emily is asking, as a faculty member on a commissions committee, would you say it's beneficial to send a statement of continued interest if you're on a wait list?
I don't think it would hurt. Yeah, no, I don't think it would hurt. I don't know that it would necessarily like boost you necessarily, but I don't see how that would be hurtful. Just, as long as it's like respectful and it's like one time, not like, hey, have you guys figured it out yet? So I think one thing that you can do in interviews is ask kind of like, oh, what is the time frame? And like a respectful way to be like, hey, when are you going to let me know if I got in or not? Is to just say like, what are the next steps in this process? That's like a good way to be like professionally asking like, okay, what's next? And they'll usually tell you like, oh, we'll let you know by like X date, like if you've been admitted or if you're waitlisted. But to answer your question, if you're on the waitlist, I don't think that hurts. Just don't like be incessant and send one of those like every week, right? Like just once is good enough.
Okay, perfect. And then Amelia is asking, what advice do you have for interviews? And then she says, how was your experience at Western? I just interviewed there myself.
Oh, cool. So I went to Western and it was a big program. I definitely remember just kind of feeling like I was, one fish in the sea. So I think that it depends on your learning style. I think it's a great institution. Like they have a really long history of like producing great PAs, and making sure that we're ready for boards. I did not necessarily feel like I had the level of like personal help that I maybe could have like utilized, like tutoring or something like that, but they did have that available. And I think kind of going back to maybe that was like my own professional maturity needing some growth, is I was too stubborn to ask for help. And part of that was also stereotype threat. I was like one of a handful of Latinx people. I was one of like 3 queer people and the only disabled person as far as I know. Sorry, I live by the train. And I basically was like, well, I'm not going to be like the stereotypical like, dumb person, because I felt like I already had like so many things like quote against me as like a queer disabled person of color. And like, I just hadn't necessarily grown into my own skin yet enough to like take advantage of all of the resources that were offered. And I think one of the advantages of going to a smaller program, so like our program is 30 students max. And one of the benefits of going to a smaller program, like if I would have gone to a small program, I think one of my professors would have been able to figure that out and like meet with me and say like, hey, I see that you're struggling. Like, do you want to talk about it? And like, that was not something that was like an option for me as a student at a huge program like that. So I think like the personal touch and the personal care and guidance that you get at a small program like is really special. So I think I would have benefited more from that type of program, but I'm still happy that I went. I'm thrilled that I'm a PA. And it was like, I tell people it's the best and worst experience of my life. I feel like that's like a common theme in PA, like that PAs will tell you about PA school, just because PA school is just so freaking hard and it's so much. But it's so worth it at the end. So I think wherever you go, like you're gonna have a good experience. That's why I say like find out what's important to you, right? Like, is it important that you can like walk to like lots of restaurants and shops like near your school, like in non-COVID times? Is it important that they have like, a cadaver lab or whatever? Like find out what those special things are and pick that program. And also talk to their students. Because my experience 10 years ago could be completely different, right? Like they could have completely different faculty now, for example.
Awesome. Thank you again for, bringing all your personal information into that. We appreciate the sincerity. This next question is from Heather. She's asking, can you put her Instagram in the chat? And we will do that. We will absolutely do that. And we encourage everybody to follow. Yeah, definitely. So let's see. Somebody else is asking, when do prerequisite credits expire?
It's usually 7 years, but some programs are 5. And that's usually just for the science prerequisites. not for all of them.
Okay, perfect.
So like you could take a, like art expression class like 20 years ago, and that probably would still count.
Wow.
Awesome.
So someone is asking, what was the most difficult part of PA school and how did you overcome it?
I would say that's presumptive in that I overcame. I feel like I definitely like stumbled through PA school. Like there was not any moment of PA school ever where I was like, I got this. Like where I'm like ready. So sorry to like burst the bubble. I'm just keeping it real. Like pretty much every day of PA school was like, I don't know if you watch Rick and Morty, but there's this episode where like the sun is rising over the hills and it's just screaming into the void. That's pretty much how like every day of PA school felt for me. It was just like, the entire time. So I would say that like the most difficult part is just like the sheer volume of information that you're getting. Like you are literally like, to give you an example of like our student schedule for the first trimester, which is 15 weeks, they have already covered an intro module, which was a week, and then a test. And then they covered they covered behavioral health next, which was 2 weeks, and then a test. And then they had dermatology, then they had HEENT, and now cardio, and they have like 4 to 5 weeks for cardio and then a test. Derm was a week, then a test. So like literally all of derm in like a week and then getting tested on it. So like it's just like a ridiculous amount of information coming at you so fast. And I would say that that's the hardest part. And the way that I like turn the volume down on my screaming, I guess, like proverbially, was I got with a study group. And that's the thing that I recommend to like every single student. Like all of our students coming in, we do like a virtual orientation with them. This year we did virtual. I imagine our next cohort will be oriented virtually as well. But just having the conversation of like, kind of get over the idea of like you have to be the best or that you're competitive, like embracing a collaborative mindset and getting in a group, even if you have had bad experiences with group projects in the past. I went through the phases of like not wanting to be in a group, being like, oh well, I don't want to like be in a group because I can't depend on group mates, or oh, I don't want to be in a group because I don't want to like be the dumb person in the group, or oh, I just like don't want to commit to a group, like I'm not ready for that level of commitment, right? Like all these different things in my mind that were like holding me back from getting in a group. And finally in like the second semester of PA school, I was like, okay, I need to get in a group. And it like changed the game. Like it made it so much more manageable. I understood the material so much better. And I had like, the help to like not feel like I had to do absolutely everything on my own. And it's like good practice to work with a group because you're going to be working in a group when you get out into the field.
Awesome. And thank you for the screaming sun analogy. It really made it easier to digest. Totally understand what you're saying. So Becky is asking, what is something you wished PA school had taught you or you think they should have gone over?
I would love to see more emphasis on like holistic care. So even if that was talking about like, when we talk about orthopedics and inflammation, talking about like, hey, turmeric and omega-3 are clinically shown to have the same efficacy as a daily NSAID, like without the side effects of destroying your GI tract. Like that would have been really helpful information to know, because I feel like more and more patients are wanting to seek alternative modalities of care and not wanting to be on like prescriptions. And then especially in light of like the opioid crisis, which like is a whole other topic, that the opioid crisis, just like, I have to say this as like part of my advocacy, the opioid crisis is not fueled by chronic pain patients. The opioid crisis is fueled by people who have addiction, and those are two different things. Because I think that people think like, oh, pain medicine or like, people who take narcotics or a chronic pain condition are addicts, and that is not true. So just wanted to like give that little shout out. But I wish that we had learned more alternative therapies and had more interprofessional collaboration experiences, and basically a walkthrough of like how to effectively refer to specialists and how to build an interprofessional network once you get out into the field. Because like you kind of learn like, this is what a physical therapist does, and this is what an occupational therapist does, and this is what a social worker does, like when you're in school. But when you get out into the field, you don't know like, okay, well, who's a good physical therapist, or who's like, how do I get in contact with a social worker in this area? Like depending on the person's insurance, right? Like, so just being able to like navigate that type of care to basically ensure a better like continuity of care for patients would have been really helpful, and also giving them alternatives rather than just prescription medication.
Definitely. We totally agree with that. And just kind of on a side note, it's really weird because we're like the same person. I have my fish oil and our glucosamine and turmeric we take daily. Yeah. We both work out all the time, so we know how the inflammation and all that stuff goes. It's terrible.
Wonderful.
Let's see. So somebody's asking, so they only have 5 shadowing hours currently. They've been unable to obtain more hours due to COVID. Do you think that will negatively impact their application?
I think it depends where you're applying. So like, for example, if you go on my PA box, you'll be able to find out like, okay, what are the shadowing requirements for this particular like institution or this particular program? And that'll be really good information to have. So like at Laverne, we only required 20 shadowing hours because like I said, that's a social justice issue, right? So like if you are the person in your family that works to make rent and put food on the table, like I don't expect you to have 1,000 just like free hours that you can go volunteer and like not make money for your family. Like that's not fair. So that's what I think is like really important about programs that actually like do have a commitment to diversity and inclusivity, is that like when they say that, they're like, here's how we actually like mean that. So if you are looking at a school where they're like, we require, 10,000 shadowing hours, like, which is obviously like hyperbolic, but like some program that requires like a god awful amount of shadowing hours, like is catering to a student demographic who has the resources to volunteer that much time, which doesn't lend to diversity. So I guess to answer your question, it may or may not hurt your application. I would try and do more events like this with Rohit and Alia and Pre-PAPals. Like I would try to do more of these and talk about it in your COVID essay area. But yeah, I would also do your homework on the programs to make sure that you're not applying to somewhere that requires 1 million shadowing hours, because you won't be as competitive in that program.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Really researching the program and knowing what they're about. This is an interesting question, and this individual actually reached out to us directly asking for help about this, and unfortunately we weren't able to provide her any information, so it's kind of a difficult topic. Maybe you'll be able to help her better, but Ebre is asking, how can someone with no authorization to work in the US get PCE? So from what I understand, she's from overseas, and she's now trying to get into a PA program, but she doesn't have the ability to work because she doesn't have like a work visa. So she's wondering about how she can get PCE.
That's an excellent question. I think one of the things that you could do is talk to your undergraduate like resource center at whatever college you go to, and find out if they have like work study options, because that might be an option to at least get some professional experience. Like you're not going to get patient care hours that way, but you could at least talk to the undergraduate resources and find out like, hey, is there some way that I can do like work study with like this department that maybe has a relationship with healthcare providers? So for example, like maybe you have a kinesiology department who like works with physical therapists or athletic trainers like out in the field, right? Because all of my patient care hours were via athletic training. So you could maybe talk to like the kines department and say like, hey, like, can I do work study in the athletic training room and work with the student athletes? Because I don't know if it's different to do like work study versus like work in the US, like outside of an institution. But even if you did like patient care hours, like in an athletic training room or something like that, that would still technically count because you're treating them for a medical issue. So I would say talk to your undergraduate services, like the career center at your college.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that. Let's see. So,
what was something, or actually, I'm not sure what they're asking. So I'm gonna. They're asking what was something you knew before going into PA school, but I'm not quite sure what they're asking here. So
I guess like I knew I loved my husband. I knew like I say like just general like let's see. I guess that's like kind of too general of a question.
Yeah, that was impressive though. Those interview skills
Yeah.
from PA school really came in handy there.
Yes, exactly. Plus just like it's true, right? Like my husband is my favorite human being. So like
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm sure relationships like that are really important to getting by, you know.
for sure.
my husband is like the reason I'm like a functional human. He's so wonderful. Like I don't know what I would do without him.
Well,
I would just revert to that screaming son in the background.
Yeah. Is he there right now listening?
No, he's inside making sure our doggies are staying happy. So I'm outside in our little patio because it's still a little bit daylight out here in California. It's like
so that's even more that you're bragging on him and he can't even hear you. So you're not like, you're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah, no, not for like some nookie later or something like that, right? Like I'm doing it. That was another PG word for YouTube, by the way.
Yes,
so,
ma'am. Got it.
Yes.
Let's see. So a lot of questions on PCE. People are asking, like, just to give you kind of a run through of the stuff that we're seeing most is how you can get PCE without a certification, recommendations on PCE, whether one is better than the other, any general information you might have about PCE.
So patient care hours can take many forms. So the only ones that I'm aware of that you can get without like a certification of some type, like mine, were basically working with college athletes as an athletic training student. So I technically wasn't credentialed yet, but I had like literally 2,000 hours of patient care built into my curriculum because that's like part of what you have to do to like become an athletic trainer. So working with various patient populations can count. So if you are doing something like athletic training, working with student athletes, that counts. If you become like a physical therapy aide, I'm not sure if there's credentialing involved with that, but I know that we have like a big physical therapy clinic and they always need aides and they take like a lot of college students who are like, you know, studying kinesiology or something like that. I would say that like if you still have a couple cycles to go, right? Like let's say you're maybe 2 or 3 cycles out and you're like getting ready to apply. It might not be too bad of an idea to like look into a 6 to 8 month medical assistant certification or EMT certification. I don't know how long that is, but it's worth it in the long run to get those hours. Or consider, I'm trying to think what else you could do for patient care hours. You could consider becoming like a CNA or some other type of certification. I honestly don't think there's like a quick fix to getting patient care hours. Like that's kind of what the profession was founded on. It was on people who had already been in the military, right? And basically had done all of this patient care and already had that experience under their belts and therefore only needed 1 extra year of school and 1 extra year of rotations to be like practicing PAs. So that PCE piece is vital in my opinion, and there's really not like a shortcut to it. So it might mean getting an additional certification or like getting a minor in something that's going to force you to work with student athletes if that's the population that you have access to, right? Another thing that you could consider, I think it might not count as like patient care hours, but like interaction, like healthcare hours, or like kind of basically just having additional exposure to people in healthcare, is you can go volunteer like at a hospital or like at a nursing home, because there's always like a huge need for that. So a lot of my like healthcare experience slash like non-patient care, just like the kind of stuff where I like shadowed and observed and like just kind of was a fly on the wall, was spent at a convalescent home. There's a little convalescent home here in Laverne called Hillcrest Homes, and I literally did like art therapy with like the residents for like, I want to say the better part of like 2 or 3 years when I was in high school. And I put those as some of my hours because it was like working with patients who had dementia. And yes, I wasn't like giving them healthcare, but like it counted as like contact hours with them. So just spitballing some ideas, I guess.
Yeah, good point. Kind of on that same topic, Afra is asking, do you think being an EMT increases acceptance chances compared to medical assistant or scribe? So is there like, would you say there's like a ladder of PCE that's better than the other, or
No. No, and it kind of depends like who you are as a person, right? So like some of my like stellar students have EMT training, and some people in PA education will say that people that are already kind of like set in their ways are not as coachable. And I think that, and part of being a good PA applicant is being adaptable and coachable and not thinking you know everything when you get into a PA program. So I would say, regardless of what your patient care hours are, it depends less on what you did for patient care hours and more on who you are as a person. So if you show up and you're kind of an asshole at your interviews, like, you're not going to get in. Like, I'm not saying that the person who's asking that is that, is that kind of person, but I'm just saying, like, it matters more like how you interact with your peers and how you're going to treat patients than what type of PCE hours you got.
Sure. Okay, so transitioning over to another subject, another Brianna is asking, how important is the yeah.
How's important? What? I'm sorry.
Oh no, she said she's wondering about the importance of the GRE.
So this is like another soapbox topic for me. I'm glad you asked, other Brianna. I am strongly against the GRE or any other standardized testing, whether that's the MCAT, the PA-CAT, or even like the idea of the SATs or the ACTs to get into undergrad. For the reason that it is like there's published literature on this, that standardized testing is racist and it's ableist. So basically, some of the colloquialisms that are used in like some of the terms on standardized testing favor people with like Anglo and European upbringing and strongly disadvantage people who have English as a second language, or strongly disadvantage people of lower socioeconomic status who may not know what, like, while you're playing squash, blah, 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 like, please explain this. Like, well, if you don't know what squash is or what the rules of squash are because you like grew up in the inner city, like, that isn't fair. So there's other like topics on this, and also it's just like an ableist concept because people who are like neurodiverse or on the autism spectrum or like have other learning disabilities like dyslexia, like, historically perform poorly on standardized tests, and it has no bearing on what type of PA they're going to be. So this goes back to like researching your program. So like the program that I work at, our entire institution has done away with standardized testing as a benchmark to get into any of our programs. So like you don't need an ACT or an SAT to get into our undergrad. We do not require the GRE, and we never will. And we do not require the PA-CAT, and we never will, because it tells us nothing other than that you had access to a tutor. Or other than that you had the ability to sit still and take a test for a while. So standardized testing really has no bearing on the kind of provider you're going to be. And even like the NCCPA says, the score that you get on the PANCE, which is like the ultimate standardized test to end all tests, right? The score that you get on the PANCE has no bearing on the kind of PA you're going to be. So I'm strongly against standardized testing, and I would strongly question any institution that's like, yes, we support diversity and inclusivity, but like you need this level of GRE score to pass, because those are contradicting statements.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that. I personally have test anxiety, so I can resonate a lot with that. And to kind of piggyback off of that, someone says, so you mentioned PA-CAT. Do you think that other schools will completely transition to that? And if they will, when do you think that may be?
I strongly hope not. Like, I will do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. I mean, I don't have very much power, but I mean, like, I will do whatever I can to like prevent that from happening, because to me, it's just a money grab, right? Like, it hasn't been validated to show that it reflects PA education any better than the GRE does, or preparedness for PA education. And it is, as far as I look at it, it's an unvalidated test that costs an extra $300 to take, and is going to cost you a lot of extra time and money to study and get a tutor for it, like you need a tutor. So, and it just creates a lot of anxiety. So I certainly hope that that's not the way that it goes. I know from an institutional standpoint, because this is a discussion that I've had with some of my like PA colleagues on Instagram, is like, well, some institutions make the PA program have a standardized test, which means like, for example, I work at the University of Laverne, and let's say like us as the PA program was like, we don't want to have standardized tests, but the university said, well, sorry, you have to, because it's like a university policy. Then I would hope that the leadership of that PA program would be able to say like, no, this isn't right. and creates a barrier to lower socioeconomic students and students with, neurodiversity and students of color and students with English as a second language and all of the things that we mentioned, right? And advocate for that not to be a thing. Like, I always thought that like the policies in an institution were set in stone, but now that I've worked at an institution, like there's channels for everything. Like it moves slowly at any institution because you basically have to go like up the levels, right? You have to go to like the program director and then the dean and then the college and then the university. But like if somebody at whoever's your program director strongly believes that like, hey, this is an important issue, they'll pose it to the institution, or they'll say like it's suggested but not required. So Stanford, for example, like if from what I've heard through the grapevine, and I haven't verified this, but what I've heard through the grapevine is that Stanford has changed their admissions requirements to say suggested rather than required, which I think is a good policy, right? Like it basically takes off some of the institutional burdens and like that excuse of like, well, the institution makes us have an extra standardized test. Like, I really don't think that any standardized test for a PA program is, validated or appropriate at this point, especially when we need healthcare providers who are more compassionate human beings and less regurgitant robots. Like, that's just a thing that we're always going to need in healthcare. And I would rather someone spend the time and the money on their own personal or spiritual or like emotional development, like becoming a better person rather than like studying for the GRE. But that's just me.
Yeah, for sure. We totally agree with you. And it seems like the chat does as well. You're getting a lot of support, people, really agreeing with what you're saying.
Thanks. Like I grew more as a person going to EDC after my senior year of high school than I did studying for the ACTs, I'll tell you that much. So like, it's like Professor Cardenas said, go to Burning Man instead of taking the GRE. No, I didn't. I'm just saying it's a good growth experience. Like go live your life and get that like human experience under your belt. It's more important than a standardized test.
Let's see. So I think this is a big topic in California in particular, but Jen is asking, how do you feel about NPs wanting to practice autonomy? Do you think it'll affect PAs in the future?
I personally feel like that's a good step in the right direction for them. I think the thing that's, I come from a privileged place saying this, working in a specialty that definitely is in desperate need of providers all the time. So I don't work in a specialty where like there's 10 PAs wanting to work in chronic pain management lined up ready to take my job, right? Or NPs or whatever, mid-levels, APPs is what we're called now, advanced practice providers. So I think that that's great that they are advocating for that. And basically, I think one thing that we ought to avoid as advanced practice providers is pitting us against them. There's a lot of like rhetoric, especially like surprisingly in like Facebook groups. I feel like Facebook groups with older PAs are actually like way more drama than like Instagram posts and stuff like that. But like, I don't think that we should be trying to hold our colleagues back. I think that NPs have gained that practice autonomy thanks to the strength of their legislative bodies and their advocacy groups. And so for anybody that's like, well, how do PAs get to that level? Or like, why can't PAs do that? It's because there's a lot more money behind nursing, right? Like they have a lot more members, they have a lot more money, they have a lot more nursing unions, they have a lot more like pull on Capitol Hill compared to us as PAs. And when you think about it, nursing's been around for like a long time, like hundreds of years, right? And so as PAs, we've been around since like the 70s. So it's not something like our profession's only like 50 years old, right? So like it's not reasonable or realistic, in my opinion, to expect that we would have the same like legislative and lobbying and advocacy power that things like the AMA and like nursing associations do. But I think that we can get there. As far as how it affects our jobs, I think it just kind of depends on the provider. So I have worked with people or supervising physicians rather that only hire PAs because their words, not mine, is that PAs are cooler, which I mean, I agree with that, but it's kind of a personal preference. And sometimes physicians may look at an advanced practice provider who has full autonomy as like not somebody who's going to work with them, but somebody who's going to like butt heads with them. And so I have also worked with a doctor that said, I like hiring PAs that I can teach medicine the way that I want them to practice medicine, not somebody who's coming in and already thinks they know everything. So I think that there's benefits to the autonomy, but I don't think that PAs are going to be going anywhere. Like, I know that people are worried about it, but I think there's enough like need for care to go around for all of us. So.
Yeah, and just to comment on your mindset about, you know, not thinking that other AAPAs are like competition, that's applicable to students as well. I've heard of, you know, like programs doing interviews and then like leaving like, you know, like a bait out there, like, you know, somebody in there to just see how well you operate with your peers, to see like, you know, whether you want to talk to them and that kind of stuff, or whether you're going to be like that person that's like, no, I need to focus on myself. I hate everybody else. They're just competition. And in a healthcare setting, like that's so important. You want to work as a team to give the patients the best outcomes rather than focusing on yourself. So totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's not about us anymore. Like it's, I don't know, I look at healthcare as like a service industry, you know, like I always treat my patients like I'm like, it's so funny. Like somebody said, like, you treat your patients like you're expecting them to tip you. And I was like, that's like my server experience coming out, because you better believe I did like all of the odd jobs in undergrad. And so like that service aspect, I think, gives me good like patient reviews and gave me the confidence to like open and practice on my own, because if you don't keep your patients happy, you're not going to keep them, you know. So you have to, and that doesn't mean like giving them everything they want, right? The person comes in and they're like, I have the flu, one antibiotic packet, please. Like, no, that doesn't mean just giving them what they want, but that means like being a good human being to them and like caring for their needs.
Yeah, I really like that. Treat your patients like you're expecting a tip out of them. So we're getting a lot of questions about like C's and prereqs on whether or not you should retake them. So just to kind of paraphrase all of them, group them into one, what's your opinion on retakes, post-bac courses, whether or not you need to retake your C's, if they're prereq or not, science GPA, all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I guess it depends on where you're applying, right? Like if you meet the prerequisites, because like, how should I say this? Like some programs, they go by a cumulative process where like your whole picture, right? Like your GPA, your hours, everything, plus your interview count. And some programs only count your interview. Like basically, if you meet the prerequisites and you got invited to interview, everybody's on a level playing field. So depending on what the interview process is, will kind of help determine, I guess, like how competitive you might be with a C on your transcript. And I think as long as you can explain, you know, hey, I got a C because ABC happened in my life, and like you were able to get it together after that, then that makes sense, right? Like, so, you know, you might go through something in life where like somebody in your family got sick and you had to be a caregiver for them, or like somebody in your family lost a job and you had to like work an extra shift or like pick up extra hours and your grade suffered. Like if that's the case, you should speak to it. And I would also utilize my PA box to check not just like what the requirements of the program are, like a 3.0 GPA, but like what the stats of their actual people who get into PA school there are. Because if it's like, oh, we require a 3.0, but then you look at who gets accepted and everybody who gets accepted has a 3.7, well, you're not going to be as competitive with the 3.0 versus like another school might require a 3.2. And like when you look at who gets in, it's actually people with a 3.2, then you're going to be more competitive with your 3.2. You know what I mean? So I would look at what your cumulative and what your science GPA ends up to be.
Awesome. And I just want to check with you and make sure, are we doing okay in time? We want to make
sure.
Yeah,
I can go like another 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I guess like one other thing to add to that real quick of that last question would be to like make sure to talk to other PAs. Like the people that are going to write your letters of rec are probably at least one of them is a PA or an MD. Like you should talk to them and be like, do you think I'm ready to be a PA? And just keep it 1000 with me. And like, if you have that kind of relationship that you've developed, they'll tell you, like, if they'll tell you like, you know what, no, you're kind of, you know, kind of green, you need some more experience, you need a gap year, like, you know, then take that for what it's worth, right? Like that's really valuable information to have, and wait a year to apply and go retake your class in that year. You know what I mean? But if they're like, you know what, that 1C was like a bump in the road and I think you're ready and you're going to be a great PA, then go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, you actually answered one of our next questions. They were asking about gap year, but that's perfect. So maybe 2 or 3 more questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Maria is asking, kind of going back to the previous topic, what's your opinion on the idea of scope creep, and that PAs are trying to practice beyond their education and creeping into what what physicians are more trained to do?
So stop scope creep is probably the most tone deaf and horrific thing that I've seen in a long time. Like, it was such a tone deaf statement for the AMA to make for stop scope creep. Because not only is it inaccurate, right? Like, people aren't trying to practice beyond their scope. They're trying to broaden their scope so that they can practice what they've learned and what they've been trained to do. So like, maybe 20 years ago, people would have called optimal team practice, which is where like, okay, me as a pain management provider, like I can practice pain management under a family practice doctor because I've been trained in pain management. Like, they might have called that scope creep, like, several years ago. But I think that it's incredibly tone deaf, and it's very like LDE, which stands for little something energy of the AMA, to basically like pick on mid-levels, like, or excuse me, advanced practice providers, because there's like enough sick people to go around. I get that they're like, oh, but our reimbursement is suffering, and there's so many other reasons that people are like, oh, we're losing our jobs to PAs and NPs. Like, A, no, they're not. They just feel like they are. And B, if a resident, or excuse me, a new doctor is losing a job to a PA or an NP, it's probably because the PA or the NP was like a better fit for the job. And I don't think that we need to be competitive. I think that it's incredibly short-sighted, and I think that it erodes a lot of trust, and it makes us look like whiny babies as healthcare providers in a time where we absolutely, as healthcare providers, need to be united and show that we are like adults and not like whiny children being like, well, no, oh, she got a new scope of practice. Like, I'm all upset now. Like, can I get a new toy? Like, no, that's stupid. And it makes us look like children, and stop scope creep is stupid. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, well, 100% agree. It just seems like such a selfish sentiment.
1000%. I mean, especially like when there's people out there that like legit don't believe COVID is real. Like they're gonna turn around and be like, well, doctors don't even think PAs and NPs should be like practicing and blah blah blah, like based on that type of comment. So like, the trickle down effects of a ridiculous comment like that like have lasting impacts, not just for like us as professionals, but for how our patients take us at our face value. Like, if we look like children, they're not going to trust us.
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, I think they took back that, or they deleted their tweet or whatever it was pretty fast, and they got like a ton of negative feedback, as they should have. But
yes, but they still like never issued a policy statement being like, our bad. Like, even Figs did that. Come on, people.
yeah,
Like if a scrubs company, like what Figs did was disgusting. Like, I'm not trying to like rep Figs or anything like that. / like Figs is for skinny people. Like, that's just me. But I definitely like, think that a scrubs company shouldn't be more apologetic than like the AMA.
Right. But on that, you've covered a lot of these topics before, but I think it's just kind of a good like food for thought question to end it on. They're asking about your opinions on the future of PA. So if you could discuss things like salary, oversaturation, their role in medicine, and if you think that'll shift, just anything that concerns the future of what the profession will entail.
I think that we're going to keep growing. I mean, I think one of the beautiful things about PAs is our lateral mobility and like being able to pivot into like wherever we're needed. So like, if I were not a PA, I don't think that I would have had the flexibility to have like worked in the urgent care and in pain management at the same time, and like, gotten those experiences under my belts, and like gone into like starting my own business and like that kind of stuff. Like, that would have been like unheard of for me if I didn't go through school with the idea in mind that I could be flexible with my career, and have like a non-prescriptive like approach to how I wanted to live my life. And I think that like one of the things that inspires me like freaking every day, like, is my students. Like, my students are just phenomenal human beings. Like, they are some of like the best human beings that I've ever met. They're fantastic. And I think that largely the generation of PAs are young people. And young people are just like so much more empathetic. I think it's because young people have grown up seeing their parents or like older generations model like how not to be kind to each other and how to basically like ruin an economy and like make, you know, our society like practically unbearable to navigate, right? Like, so I think that kind of the you know, chaos that we've inherited as a generation of like millennials and zennials, right? Being like, oh, like, I guess I won't be able to ever afford a house until I'm a millionaire, right? Like all of those things, right? I think living through a time like that and growing up with like an unstable economy and like climate change makes us a lot more like, to, I guess, use like a young person word, it makes us like more woke to like a lot of the stuff that's going on that maybe older generations didn't have as far as insight. And I think that social media has actually helped our profession grow because it connects PAs and pre-PAs and students in ways that we could have never done previously. And I feel like every person that I talk to about becoming a PA, like whether they're in high school or like they're in college and they've never heard of PAs, they're like, oh my God, that sounds super legit. Like, I want to do that now. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I felt when I found out about the PA profession. And so I think that as we have more events like this, as our society becomes more connected, and as people just generally become like more caring toward each other, which I think we're trending that way, that our profession will continue to grow. So I'm optimistic for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for the, you know, optimistic outlook on the future. But I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you so much for joining us. We, you know, so honored that you take the time out of your incredibly busy schedule, you know, between your own business and personal life, teaching, being a PA. I can't imagine that you could do this. And you know, really thank you for everything you do for pre-PA students. It's amazing. Obviously nothing you have to do, but the fact that you do all of this and for free because you understand where we're coming from is amazing. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me and for putting this together. And like I said, when we first met, I was like, put this on your CASPA applications that you put this together because this is amazing. And I'm like you guys are examples of like what I'm talking about, right? Like how I'm really inspired at like the ingenuity of young people and like just the way that you're like looking out for each other. Like you both could have just been like, hey, can we have a half hour of your time, Brianna? And I would have been like, yeah, sure. But instead you were like, yo, can we add like 140 people to this half hour or hour of your time? Like, you know what I mean? Because that's like how you like hype the team. You know what I mean? Like, I think that what you are both doing is fantastic. So thank you so much. I'm really honored to be able to be here with you guys.
That is, I mean, we could never have asked for a better compliment. That's so cool. I think Ollie is actually tearing up right now. So seriously,
awesome.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thanks. Well, the feeling is mutual.
Definitely.
And thanks everybody for coming. Good job on like investing in yourself, investing in your future. I know there are literally a billion other places on the internet you could be right now. So thanks for spending that time with us.
Yeah,
Really
definitely. I think we got up to 170 viewers, and there's so much support like pouring in from the chat right now. Millions of thank yous. Everybody loves you. We'll be sure to send out your Instagram one more time just in case people want to, you know, if you guys want to follow her and, you know, see what she talks about on her Instagram. It's a lot of really good information, and I think you said it really, yeah.
I'm a sporadic poster because hashtag busy, but I mean, I'm always available. Like, I know that as a student, it's probably like scary to reach out and stuff like to a healthcare provider, but just do it. Like, you're worth it. Don't stand in your own way because been there, done that. And it like takes longer to get to where you're going if you don't like rep yourself and like stand up for yourself and, you know, just.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
you're worth it.
A lot of the things that you're saying just seem like, you know, easy common sense, but these are legitimate concerns, and it seems like a small thing, but it's really a big deal. Like once you get over that barrier of just being able to even reach out to people, it's such a big deal. And the fact that you're so easy to talk to, like you're not the stereotypical like intimidating professor, you know what I mean? And you get all these topics through incredibly well. So I think this has been a really good session. A lot of people learned a lot, ourselves included, for sure.
And you're extremely relatable and very funny. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Next time I'll make sure to have my background as the Rick and Morty scenery that we've discussed. So.
Yeah. Anytime.
No, I definitely look forward to doing this again because, like, I don't know, I want to be the person that I wish I would have had as a pre-PA student. So I'm like definitely here for what you guys are doing. So thank you.
So cool.
so
So cool.
much.
Oh man, I hope everybody really takes this to heart because we're inspired personally. We want to be someone like
Alright.
you. We want to be able to give back. And you know,
Thank
we've seen a ton of amazing support in this community. Like a lot of these pre-PA students are so cool. Like even in our chat, we'll have like random secondary discussions break out about people talking, like answering other people's questions, giving their own personal things. So that's what we're all
That's
about.
awesome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. You know, the fact that we can be for this, we're really honored.
The support here is amazing. So yeah.
Definitely. So thank you so much. We'll be in touch if we can do anything for you. If you ever want to send out a poll or anything like that, we'll definitely do it. And if you want to come back, we'd be more than happy.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do this again in the new year.
For sure.
For sure.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.
Have a good night. Thank you so much.
You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care. Oh, all right, guys. Really good session. Thank you so much for joining us again. Hope you guys enjoyed that as much as we did. I definitely think that was a good one. I know a lot of you guys are wondering about the quiz. Since it wasn't your traditional case study type thing, we're going to do it a little bit differently this time.
Yes, so it's a little different since she didn't really have a presentation. Well, she did have a presentation, but it was mostly a Q&A for us to kind of give more specific tips. So the quiz is a little different. I'm about to send it out, but it's 3 multiple choice questions and then a short summary. So as long as you get 2 out of the 3 questions correct and you provide a 2 to 3 sentence summary, you'll get a certificate.
Yeah, so a little bit different this time, but should be equally as straightforward. The 3 questions aren't anything difficult or tricky, just to make sure that you were here and paying attention. And that summary can be anything, you know, something you learned, something you liked about the topic, or something that really stood out to you that was kind of eye-opening, anything like that. But yeah, guys, we have another session coming up in a few days here. That is on the, what is it, the 7th?
The 2nd.
The 2nd.
So
okay.
this Wednesday, actually. The time might change. We haven't made the post yet, but we're just going to confirm some details with the presenter, and then we'll make that post. But there should be one on this Wednesday, and if not, there is definitely going to be one on the 7th with a psychiatry PA. So
yeah, something different.
And if we do have the one on the 2nd, it is with a neurosurgery PA. So Wednesday's neurosurgery PA, and then what day is that? Next Monday would be with a psychiatry PA.
Yeah, so definitely stay tuned on Instagram. We'll keep you guys posted. We're going to try and do at least once a week. But, you know, as we've been doing a couple times more maybe. But yeah, guys, we'll hang out right here. If you guys have any questions for us or about the quiz or anything at all, just let us know. We'll be in the chat, okay? Thank you so much, guys. Take care.